What am I talking about today? I've called this Making Mountains. Like any good designer, I've done my user research, and if I'm not mistaken, I think 79% of UX designers love Game of Thrones. So I've got a picture of the mountain on there. I specifically chose this photo because this is when he was like a proper human being. I don't really like now he's turned into a weird zombie thing. It's not very cool. But anyway, I'm talking about, the subtitle is How Broad Is Your Base? I've got this like fear about the tech industry, and more specifically about the design industry, that we're all becoming a little bit too specialist. We've got these very sort of pointy sets of skills. We don't have this kind of like broad base. So I'm hopefully going to be sort of telling you a bit about that and my views on those sorts of things. So I will start by talking a little bit about myself. So my name's Rory. I'm a creative director. I work at a company called Forge. We're an agency based over in Clerkenwell. It's been quite an exciting sort of 18 months for us, actually. We relocated this time last year, so we moved from Hertfordshire into London, so that's been really exciting. And we also rebranded as well at the beginning of this year, so there's been loads of new people, and it's been really exciting. So what do? We kind of do three main things, really. We do kind of bespoke software solutions for some of our clients. So we build some quite cool apps. We build like mobile apps and web apps and things like that. At the moment, we're working on a pretty cool app for a professional cyclist, which is looking really cool. We do some like really weird stuff as well. We're working on a learning platform for implant dentists as well, so we do some quite strange things as well. As well as the kind of software stuff, we also do websites, good old-fashioned websites. People don't really want to talk about websites so much nowadays. It's all about apps and things, but I can, I'll let you know that there's still lots and lots of people looking for websites, and it's still a sort of burgeoning industry. And then the final thing we do is kind of marketing. So we do a lot of kind of content marketing and things like that, and it's all about getting results for our clients. So that's kind of a bit of an overview of what we do. So sometime kind of last year in my role was kind of a creative director, I was kind of looking at how we could improve our output and improve the things that we were producing for our clients. As the kind of fussy designer in me kind of had this feeling that some of the things that we were sort of creating in design weren't necessarily being transferred into when it's being developed, and the final product wasn't quite as good as kind of how I felt. But equally, I was getting frustrated with development teams, but they were getting equally frustrated with me and not sort of understanding what they're all about. So I started looking at kind of our sort of typical process. So this is a very sort of basic process for building a website or building an app. There's obviously a lot more to it. But what I realised is we kind of generally have kind of four people like this. Working in very specific areas. We kind of got like four young people who are really great in these areas. So they're fantastic at coming up with the strategy behind a new website. They're fantastic designers, or they're really good front-end developers playing around with CSS and HTML and things like that, or they're great back-end guys. They can do all the server-side programming, like real specialists. And I kind of felt like the kind of things were kind of falling through the gaps, and I think that's probably a bit of a complaint that lots of people have kind of realised in their own situations. I kind of felt like there was kind of just these massive gaps forming. So I kind of looked at, how we could think about improving that. And I think the sort of typical thing that you do is you go, let's do some processes, right? Let's do some stuff. So what are we going to do? Documentation, brilliant. Everyone loves style guides, for example, creating style guides. Fantastic. So we started doing a lot of those sorts of things. But I should just say that working in an agency, pretty fast-paced. We have a lot of clients, a lot of projects on the go. And we don't really have the kind of luxury to spend sort of months and months, hours and hours, creating very extensive documentation for things. There just isn't the sort of hours to cover every single possible edge case. So that kind of works. It's kind of all right. The next thing, obviously, better communication. Let's have better sort of handoffs between individuals, which is a really good thing to do. I put on there Slack. That's kind of changed everything, hasn't it, in the past few years? I think Slack's fantastic. It can be a little bit detrimental as well. I think it's quite easy for it to become a bit of a crutch. It's easy for me to just fire off a question to a developer about a particular thing without really thinking about it, and inevitably they probably haven't snoozed their Slack, and they'll get interrupted by something, and it kind of bring them out of the work they're doing. So it's not maybe super efficient. There's certain things we can do, but it's not super efficient. So I kind of started to think, what else can we do? And I kind of came up with the idea that I really think that we kind of need to develop a broader base for each individual. So kind of what I thought is, wouldn't it be really great if we were a bit more like this? So instead of being just a fantastic designer, you're a fantastic designer, but you have a little bit of knowledge crossing over into kind of front-end development or into strategy and things like that. And I think that's really, really important. So that's where I've got the mountains idea, right? It looks like mountains, doesn't it? I've even done a slide. There we go, mountains. I think like typically I've sort of heard this kind of concept referred to as like T-shaped skills. But I don't really like that, because then you have to turn the T upside down, and I don't know. Mountains is much cooler, I think. So what are we doing to make mountains? We're doing a bunch of different things. First of all, we've sort of started to take a slightly different approach towards training. In the past, a designer would always be going on a design course. But actually, they're already like pretty good at design. Let's send them on like a marketing course, and they kind of get an idea behind the things that they're designing. So that's kind of just a different way of looking at that. The next thing, which I'm super excited about, and something we've started just recently, is this idea of sharing corner. So this is really cool, and everyone's really got on board with this. So once a week, one of the members of the team shares something that they've been working on or something they're kind of interested in with the rest of the team. And what that kind of means is you get designers talking about typography to back-end developers, you get marketers talking about SEO to front-end developers, and it's really exciting. You're kind of sharing all this extra knowledge that person might not normally have sort of come into contact with. So I think it's really exciting. The other thing we do is we've tried sort of switching out jobs a little bit. So this really works really well between sort of development specialists, switching out and working in different areas, and then that can kind of inform the things you're doing. And then finally, internally, we've started doing more sort of holistic projects. So having a single member of the team sort of responsible for the whole project, so they can have a go at doing some of the UX, the wireframing, a little bit of an idea at some of the design, all those sorts of things. Obviously, sort of taking ideas from the rest of the team, but really having an influence on the whole project rather than just a component part. So all this sort of all this talk about sort of specialisms within my within our own company, I started to think a little bit about the kind of tech industry and sort of design as a whole. And I've got this, like I said, I've got this real fear. So back in 2010, I think that was when I first started sort of getting interested in the web and design and things like that. 2010, it was brilliant. There was one job role. It was called web designer. It was fantastic, right? So what would a web designer do? Well, they kind of just do a bit of everything. They'd do a bit of the wireframing. They'd meet with a client. They'd design everything. Back then, skeuomorphism was pretty big then. So if you could somehow incorporate a coffee cup stain into the background of your website, you were like a proper good designer then. Then after that, you'd do some of the coding and things like that, and then finally you'd faff about, open up FileZilla and FTP up your files, and it was brilliant. You kind of had to cover the whole thing. Fast forward to 2018, and this is the kind of situation. This is just stuff off the top of my head, but there's so many different job roles now, and that's fantastic, because it means we're kind of in a mature industry, and we've got all these experts in different areas. But what concerns me is I think there's a real pressure, particularly on young people entering the industry, to really sort of focus in on one particular area. you can go away and do a course specifically in UX design and become fantastic at doing that, but you haven't necessarily had the opportunity to kind of build that broad base about all the other sort of things connected to it. So that kind of leads me to my kind of broad hypothesis, I suppose, about this whole talk, is that broader is better, I think. And I've kind of got 3 theories with that. So I think, first of all, learning a new skill is often quicker and more efficient than simply sort of refining something that you're already pretty good at. Secondly, I think that a wide base will make you a more effective designer. Hopefully I've sort of demonstrated a little bit of that already. And then finally, I think a broad base is essential for a lasting career, I think, actually. So to tackle the first one, this kind of idea of quickness and efficiency. So one of my big passions outside of design and all those sorts of things is rock climbing. Have we got any rock climbers here at all? Oh yeah, one over there, fantastic. So I've been doing this for years and years and years. I'm the sort of person that with my hobbies, I find something I like and then I really just like latch onto it. Absolutely love it. By the way, I kind of like this photo. It kind of makes me look like I'm a pretty cool dude. In reality, this is like really low down. Like the floor's just like here, and then the top's up here. Like I'm actually kind of a bit scared of heights. I'm not that cool. But one of the things that I love about climbing is like making progress in something, and that's probably what you guys love about the things that you do. You like getting better at stuff. So sometime last year I did this really depressing thing, right? I charted my progress as a climber rather, looking at the different grades I've achieved according to the years that I've been doing it. And it became quite depressing, really, because you can kind of see the curve. Like there was some fantastic gains up to about 2008 or something like that. Then it all just kind of like levels out, really, and to the point where I just feel like I haven't really achieved that much. And maybe that feels like maybe that's because I'm not trying hard enough. But I think if you kind of look at this kind of red line here, I think that shows. This is pretty typical to lots of learning curves. It's and this has kind of been observed across all sorts of industries. But it's you can make quite sort of rapid gains when you first start learning about something, but it becomes harder and harder to kind of break through plateaus and get better at things the more familiar you are with a subject. So so I love this idea of trying to make sort of the quickest gains possible in an area. So you might have heard of the 10,000 hour rule. A guy called Malcolm Gladwell, popular author, popularised that a few years ago in his book Outliers. And he sort of basically says that you need about 10,000 hours to become like a proper expert at something. And I think that kind of works really, really well if you want to be like the best like figure skater in the world, or the best violinist or something like that, because in 10 years' time those things will probably still exist. For me, plugging sort of 10,000 hours into very sort of specific areas within our industry, which is changing all the time, seems like a bit of a risk to me. So based on that kind of idea of learning curves and things like that, I sort of I read somewhere this kind of idea, and this might be total rubbish, but I kind of like it. Instead of 10,000 hours, maybe 1,000 hours you can get quite good at something, 100 hours you can get pretty like capable, and in 10 hours you can kind of just get ability to converse on something. You can learn a surprising amount, I think. So how did I approach this climbing conundrum? I will get back to design at some point. How did I approach that? Decided to sack it off entirely, sign up to the London Marathon, which I'm doing in a few weeks' time, which is very exciting. And so I've plugged in about 70 odd hours. I think by the time when I've done the marathon, it will be about 100 hours. But I've learned a whole load of things. One of my sort of biggest fears, I suppose, is spending more time running, and I haven't really done a lot of running in the past, is that I'd get a lot worse at rock climbing, the thing that I love. But in reality, it kind of hasn't really been that way. This kind of new skill that I've developed has kind of informed that existing skill quite a bit in some strange ways, really. I've sort of like lost weight, I've become a bit fitter, and all those things have played into something I love doing. So this is kind of my point, really. I think that sometimes new skills can inform the ones you already have in quite surprising ways. So moving on to my next point about being more effective, and so I'll just sort of go through this very quickly. So take something really, really simple, like a landing page, right? So lots of you guys, you probably design apps and things like that, but I'd imagine that a lot of people in this room have been asked to design a landing page for an app download or something like that at some stage in their career. And when you think about it, there's really like quite a lot of stuff that goes into designing a really decent landing page, like things you maybe not necessarily always think of. Things like search engine optimization, like the way that Google sees the page might actually influence the way you design it, not just the UX side. Things like branding, how on brand are you making this page. So I kind of think that if you've got a good idea about all of these things, you don't have to be absolutely brilliant at all of these things. You end up making a sort of a better product at the end. So on to my final point about sort of building a lasting career. So I'm really sort of fearful about having these kind of skill sets that are sort of look like this and they're sort of toppling. I'm really fearful of that, and something that I want is I kind of want that broad base. And for two reasons really. Something that I've noticed in my career as kind of I've become more experienced, I've become kind of less responsible for delivery of like component parts and more responsible for delivery of like of an overall product. And yes, and I don't think I would have been able to do that if I hadn't have developed all those other sort of broader skills that kind of prop those things up. So I think that's pretty cool. Final thing is, like, obviously, as I've already mentioned, we're in an industry that's changing by the day, right? It's constantly evolving. Not just because of I put robots and shit, not just because of like AI and all those sorts of things, but other stuff as well. So I was thinking about an example today actually, and I was looking at the prototyping tools that we use, and there's like bloody loads of prototyping tools now, isn't there? There's like Vision, and there's like Marvel and Figma, and there's like all these things. And I think maybe 6 years ago I would have gone, right, I'm going to learn every single one of them, I'm going to be really, really good at that, I'm going to become a master of that. Now I'm a bit like, okay, I can kind of use one of them pretty well. Do I need to commit so much time into that thing when in a couple of years' time some of those will have fallen by the wayside anyway? So that's kind of my view on that. I've got a quote here, enough to be dangerous. That's by Marissa Mayer, ex-CEO of Yahoo, worked at Google for 20 odd years, incredibly successful woman, and she spoke about I think when they were redesigning their logo, she said that she wasn't a designer, but she knew enough to be dangerous, and that really kind of fascinates me. Really, I like this idea of looking at new topics and just gaining just enough to be dangerous. I think you can be quite surprised by how much you can learn about a topic in just in a fairly short amount of time. So what does all of this mean for you guys? Well, I think it means sort of do something new. First of all, I'd say that you guys are obviously passionate about what you do. You wouldn't come out here and want to expand your mind by doing these things if you weren't. So that's brilliant. So you're doing the right thing anyway. But I think the next thing is, and it's something that I'm sort of personally trying to do, is to sort of challenge myself to do something new. So whatever it is you normally do on a day-to-day basis, try something different. So I've just put some random things off the top of my head. Why don't you code? If you've never coded something, code something. That's like it's such a rewarding thing to do. Create a brand identity. Understand that kind of the ethos behind creating a visual identity. Go and take photographs. That'll tell you loads about composition and things like that. Draw, design a font. That's something I tried to do last year. And the things you learn about circles and squares and how they look next to each other, it's really, really cool. Learn about economics. That kind of starts to tell you about how businesses work and things like that. Learn marketing. Make something with your hands. Like we don't do enough of that nowadays, do we? I put learn archery. I don't know why I put that. I think that was just random, but I feel like that could somehow feed into like UX design somehow, maybe. I don't know. Writing, I think that's super important. Or speaking. Come up here and have a chat about something you're excited about. And that about rounds it off, I think. Thank you very much for listening.